I have witnessed countless stories of those possessing an empath soul, manipulated and emotionally tormented day in and day out. Yet, there is one instance involving a neighbor that remains etched in my memory, the moment an empathic woman reached her breaking point. It was the wedding anniversary dinner of Claire and Robert, the couple living right next door. In the candlelight that should have offered warmth, Robert, displaying quintessential narcissistic traits, began his familiar refrain, complaining about the tepid food, berating the slow service, and then, with sophisticated cruelty, dropping the remark that the dress Claire was wearing seemed a little too old for her age. Typically, the old script would replay. Claire would shrink into invisible guilt, apologizing profusely and frantically attempting to adjust the atmosphere to soothe her husband's dissatisfaction. That had been her survival mechanism for years. But tonight, something broke, or more accurately, something awakened inside her. Claire did not cry, nor did she force a smile. She gently set down her silverware, straightened her back, and looked at Robert. It was not the gaze of a wife looking at her husband, nor did it hold any resentment. It was an objective, cold, and precise gaze, like a surgeon observing a malignant tumor. It was a look that evoked the uncanny valley, familiar in form, yet chillingly distant. Robert froze. He raised his voice to regain authority, then abruptly fell silent. Within Claire's emotionless void, he could no longer find the fear or admiration required to feed his ego. In an unguarded moment, Robert leaned toward me and whispered that he saw only his own reflection, a petty man screaming into an indefinite void. For the first time in 15 years, the hunter felt fear in the face of his prey's silence. This newfound coldness in Claire, from a Jungian perspective, is not cruelty. It is the emergence of the psychological mirror. When an empath ceases to absorb emotional debris and begins to reflect the truth, they sever the narcissist's source of nourishment, forcing them to confront the greatest terror of their life, their own unknown face. And the journey to reclaim the sovereignty of the soul begins with that very awakened gaze. Stage 1. The unconscious contract and projection. To understand why Claire's quiet gaze held such devastating power, we must rewind and dive beneath the surface of emotional waves to touch the submerged part of the iceberg. The first question, and the most agonizing one that anyone entangled with a narcissist asks themselves, is, why me? Why, among thousands, did we attract each other like magnets with opposite polarities, stuck fast despite the damage? We often call it fate or destiny, but through the lens of Jungian psychology, it is a sophisticated arrangement of the unconscious. Carl Jung left us a guide, paradoxical at first glance, yet holding the golden key to freedom. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This statement is not intended to blame you. It is an invitation to look deeper into a psychological mechanism called the unconscious contract. We often mistake ourselves for passive victims falling into a predator's trap. But in reality, at a depth reason cannot reach, both sides have silently signed an exchange agreement. The empath and the narcissist find each other because they hold the missing pieces of the other. This is the game of projection, where we do not see each other's true selves, but only our own desires or fears reflected upon the other. Imagine your mind as a film projector. There are reels of strength, decisiveness, the ability to set boundaries, and a proud ego, qualities Jung called the golden shadow. These are qualities you possess, but growing up, you may have been taught they were ugly, selfish, or unsafe to reveal. So you hid those reels away, and instead of projecting them onto the screen of your own life, you projected them onto the person opposite you. You see in the narcissist sky-high confidence and fearless arrogance, and you admire it. You are drawn to them because they are living out the strong self you denied. You fall in love with your own shadow dancing on their body. This is why the wife in the story often thinks of her husband as a pillar, a man who breathes fire, someone who can say the things she dares not. She mistakes this for love, but in reality, she is performing an act of outsourcing power. She entrusts her internal authority to another because she does not yet trust her own strength. Conversely, this contract has a second, darker and heavier dimension. The narcissist, behind the grandiose shell, actually carries deep shame and absolute emptiness. They cannot face the weak, inferior, and fearful parts within themselves. Therefore, they need a place to dump them. And the empath, with an open heart and infinite capacity to contain, unwittingly becomes the perfect, emotional garbage can. The narcissist projects their evil and guilt onto you. They accuse you of being selfish, overly sensitive, and the source of all trouble. And because you are an empath with an always open empathy mechanism, you accept it all. You believe you are truly at fault. You strain yourself to carry, to fix, to purify toxic emotions that, in truth, never belonged to you. But please, pause for a beat to soothe the child within you, for this is neither a mistake nor stupidity. This is a survival strategy you learned very early, perhaps from precarious childhood years. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where having a voice was dangerous, where to be loved, you had to become a good child, knowing how to please others and soothe parents' anger. You learned to read others' emotions before you could even recognize your own. Accepting the role of a container for the narcissist subconsciously is your way of trying to control a chaotic world, believing that if you are good enough, tolerant enough, you will be safe. You projected the need for protection of a child onto an adult who never grew up. Let's return to the example of the wife who always admired her husband's loudness as a sign of decisiveness. She believed he was strong and she was weak, but then, on that fateful night, when she stopped reacting and started observing, the curtain of illusion suddenly fell. When she detached herself from the play, she realized the naked truth. The man screaming over there was not strong at all. A truly strong person does not need to use intimidation to feel big. That loud behavior was not the authority of a king, but the tantrum of a 3-year-old in an adult's body when denied what they want. Her admiration collapsed, not because he changed, but because she withdrew her projection. She realized the strength she had been seeking never lay in him. It had always resided in her own patience and resilience. She had simply handed the key to the wrong jailer. The moment you realize the nature of this unconscious contract is when the light of healing begins to seep into the cracks. This toxic relationship survived, not only due to the narcissist's cruelty, but also your unconscious complicity. Acknowledging this is not to torment yourself, but to hand back to you the scepter of autonomy. When you bravely say, "I allowed this to happen because I lacked boundaries, because I thought I wasn't strong enough to stand alone," that is not the confession of a loser. It is the first declaration of independence of an awakening soul. You begin to understand that if you were the one who signed the contract selling your power, then you are the only one with the right to tear it up. But my dear friend, tearing up a contract deeply ingested into the subconscious for years is never a walk in the park. When you begin to reclaim what is yours and return what is theirs, a real storm will strike, not just from the other side, but from within you. Do you have the courage to face the immense void when the illusion of love shatters and the pain of emotional withdrawal begins to torture every nerve cell? Stage 2. The Awakening and Reclamation. That storm does not descend from the heavens. It rises from the very fractures within your psyche when you decide to tear up the unconscious contract that has bound your life. If you are expecting that awareness will bring an immediate sense of relief, like lifting a heavy burden, I fear the truth is far more brutal. We are entering the second stage of the journey, where Carl Jung once warned with a cold but accurate observation. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Pain here is not a punishment, but the mandatory toll of truth. It is like stepping out of a dark cave that has imprisoned you for too long. The initial brilliant sunlight will not help you see the way, but will instead blind and sting your eyes. The awakening of an empath begins with a revolutionary psychological act, withdrawing the projection. You begin to take back the good qualities you assigned to the narcissist, and more importantly, you stop supplying energy to their illusions. In practical life, this withdrawal manifests through the complete cessation of 4 behaviors you previously considered efforts at communication: justify, argue, defend, and explain. JADE. Before, whenever you were accused unreasonably, your instinct was to rush in to explain, trying to prove your innocence in the hope that if you spoke clearly enough, they would understand. But now, with eyes wide open, you realize a bitter truth. They do not understand, not because you explained poorly, but because they choose not to understand. All your past explanations were merely fuel for them to twist reality and prolong the war. When you stop explaining, you sever the narcissist's most critical supply of energy. You go silent. But please do not be mistaken. This silence is not the peace of meditation, but a gut-wrenching withdrawal for both sides. For the narcissist, your retreat is like suddenly cutting off their oxygen supply. They will not accept it lightly. They will panic, rage, and seek every method to puncture your shell of silence, aiming to drag you back into your old role. But for you, the empath, the pain is even more complex. You are not just detoxing from a person. You are detoxing from an illusion of love that you spent your entire youth cultivating. You are in pain because you must single-handedly kill the hope that one day they will change. The feeling of emptiness when there is no one left to worry about, to fix, to sacrifice for, can make you feel as if you are free-falling in mid-air. Imagine you are tending to a magnificent but poisonous vine in your garden. For years, you have watered it with your own blood and tears, believing that if you cared for it well enough, it would bloom with benign flowers. Awakening is the moment you realize this plant was born to suck the life out of the surrounding vegetation. You decide to stop watering. You stand there, watching it, but that poisonous vine does not die instantly. In its maddening thirst, it extends sharp thorns, lashing out at you, clawing at you, trying to re-root itself into your flesh to seek a familiar source of life. It will appear withered and pitiful to solicit your compassion, then turn aggressive to threaten you. What you must do, and it is the hardest thing in the world, is to stand still, endure its death throes without wavering, without reaching out to save it, and without fighting back. This stage requires extraordinary inner strength because every cell in your body is screaming to return to the old habit. You will miss them, or more accurately, you will miss the feeling of being needed, miss the sweet illusion of the early days. But you must understand that this withdrawal pain is a sign that toxic neural links are breaking to make way for autonomy. Your outward silence is masking a violent civil war inside, where reason must wrestle every minute to hold back a bleeding heart, preventing it from running back toward the abuser. You are standing in the eye of the storm, unarmed, with only awareness as your shield. But to truly win and not be swept away by this storm, endurance alone is not enough. You need a sharper weapon, a source of energy more powerful than mere patience. You need to awaken a part of yourself that you have long considered an enemy, a part Jung called the shadow. Do you dare to touch the monster sleeping within you, to transform it into your most loyal guardian? Stage 3. The Alchemy of Darkness. Awakening that monster within is not a choice. It is a survival imperative if you wish to step out of the eye of the storm. Naive goodness, the weapon you once trusted implicitly, has become useless against the brutal assault of a narcissist suffering from a narcissistic injury. This is the moment we enter the most forbidden yet decisive territory of the Jungian healing journey, the alchemy of the shadow. To truly become an unbreakable mirror, the empath must face the greatest paradox of their life, learning to become dangerous. Perhaps the word dangerous makes you shudder. All your life, you have been conditioned to be a good person, an agreeable person, someone who always says yes. But Carl Jung, with an intellect that penetrated through social masks, left us a stern reminder. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You may have heard that the path of Eastern enlightenment often directs us to let go of the ego, to find serenity and flow with nature. In contrast, Jung's therapy invites humans on a confrontational journey, seeking wholeness rather than perfection. He believed we cannot reach the way by looking up toward the divine light while ignoring the roots deeply embedded in the dark soil of humanity. Enlightenment, in this sense, is when you dare to wade into the mud of your own soul, touching the prickly, cold and selfish parts you have long repressed, and inviting them to the table of your life as protectors. Shadow integration for an empath means you must allow yourself to possess the capacity to hurt others, but choose not to do so, or to do so only when your boundaries of survival are threatened. It is the ability to look a manipulator in the eye and say no unequivocally, without appending any apology. It is the willingness to disappoint others to protect your own integrity. Before, you feared that coldness would make you evil, but now you understand that such coldness is the shield of discernment. It is like the thick hide of a warrior, allowing you to walk through a storm of arrows without a scratch. If you have no fangs, your harmlessness is not a virtue, it is merely weakness. And a narcissist can always smell the scent of weakness. I know the looming fear in your mind right now is the famous warning from philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. You fear that if you become cold, ruthless, and calculating to deal with them, you will lose your benevolent nature and become a second version of the very person you are trying to escape. That is a legitimate and deeply human fear. However, Jung upgraded this philosophy to a new level, offering a solution to escape that binary trap. According to Jung, we do not fight monsters by becoming monsters that bite and tear at others. Instead, we raise the monster within us. We tame our anger, our fierceness, and our capacity for ruthlessness to transform them into a loyal watchdog. That monster is not allowed to sit in the living room or possess the house of your soul, but it is chained at the gate. When an intruder approaches with ill intent, it will bark, it will growl, and if necessary, it will bite to protect the master. Integrating the shadow does not make you evil, it makes you sovereign. You do not use the darkness to attack without cause. You use it to establish an inviolable forbidden zone. Look at the life of Tina Turner, a magnificent symbol not only in music, but in the journey of an awakened empath. Tina was once the archetypal empathic wife, enduring brutal physical and mental abuse from Ike Turner, a classic narcissist, for years. She was the supplier of talent, money, and fame for him, while she herself was crushed in fear. But her moment of alchemy did not happen when she endured. It happened when she decided to awaken the warrior within. After a fateful escape with only a few cents in her pocket, Tina entered divorce court with a decision that stunned the world. She did not fight for assets, did not demand a share of the houses or the royalties for the songs she helped create. She looked straight at Ike and the legal system, coldly relinquishing all material possessions, asking to keep only one thing, the name Tina Turner. At first glance, this act seemed like a loss, but it was the pinnacle of shadow integration. A weak person would beg, a greedy person would fight for every penny, but a sovereign queen knows where the core lies. By keeping the name, the very thing Ike created to control her, and transforming it into a symbol of self-made power, Tina executed a spectacular turning of the tables. She did not use violence to take revenge on Ike. She used her brilliant success, her independence, and her dazzling glory in the years that followed to do so. Her radiant existence became the mirror reflecting Ike's miserable failure. He gradually faded into obscurity, becoming a faint shadow, while the woman he once despised rose to become a legend. It was the perfect combination of an empathic heart and a warrior's armor. She still sang about love with full emotion, but no one could ever hurt her again. This stage marks a critical transformation in your personality. You are no longer a good person, a label often associated with permissiveness and a lack of boundaries. You become a real person, and a real person, like a brilliant rose, must always have thorns. Those thorns are not there to hurt the admirer of the flower, but to protect the bloom from rough hands seeking to pluck it for selfish possession. When you have equipped yourself with this armor of the shadow, when you are ready to stop being a victim, you enter the final and most terrifying stage for the narcissist. That is when the mirror is erected, and they are forced to see what they have hidden from all their life. Are you curious to know what happens when someone who lives by the mask is forced to look at the true face of their own soul? Stage 4. The Mirror and Ego Death. It possesses the full armor of the shadow, along with the sharp thorns of truth that will propel you straight into the final stage, the pinnacle of this psychological confrontation. This is the moment the mirror is erected, and the script of the toxic play is officially torn apart. We often wonder, why does a narcissist, someone who always appears sky-high in confidence, arrogant, and disdainful of the world, collapse so easily before the mere silence of a former victim? The answer lies in confrontation. Carl Jung once penned a famous line, laying bare the most fundamental fear of humanity, and especially of narcissists. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. For the narcissist, the soul is a desolate, forbidden land they have spent their entire lives fleeing. They build castles of grandiosity and walls of arrogance to conceal a single truth. Inside them, there is nothing but a black hole of shame and emptiness. When the empath is unawakened, you act as the energy supply to fill that black hole. You offer them admiration, fear, or even anger, all fuel for them to feel they exist. But when you practice the technique of emotional detachment, also known as gray rock, a cruel miracle occurs. You are no longer the sponge absorbing their emotions. You become a silver-plated mirror, flat and cold. Visualize the moment the narcissist rushes at you with accusations, rage, or familiar manipulative charades. Before you would react, weep, or explain. But now, you simply stand there, observing them with the absolute calm of a theater-goer. You do not absorb their energy, meaning that energy ricochets back. The narcissist looks into your eyes, and for the first time, they do not see the reflection of a god they wish to believe they are playing. They do not see your fear as reinforcing their power. They look at you and see only themselves, a screaming child, a weak bully, a rotting soul desperately trying to be recognized. This reflection causes a psychological shock that Jung called the collapse of the persona, leading to ego death. For a normal person, the death of the ego can be a spiritual turning point, leading to enlightenment. But for the narcissist, whose entire existence is based on a false self, facing the truth that I am no one is literal death within the psyche. They feel as though they are being annihilated. The emptiness they have tried to escape for so long suddenly appears vividly in your indifferent eyes. That is why they often react in two extreme ways, either attacking you frantically in a state of narcissistic rage to shatter the mirror, or fleeing desperately to find a new, easier supply where they can continue to maintain their illusion. To understand this tragedy more deeply, look at Oscar Wilde's literary masterpiece, The Picture of Dorian Gray, a perfect example of the relationship between the narcissist and the mirror of truth. Dorian Gray is the embodiment of a typical narcissist, beautiful, charming, eternally young, and worshipped by all. He lives a debauched, cruel life and never has to take responsibility for his actions. But he has a secret. All the aging, ugliness, scars of sin, and the rot of his soul do not appear on his face, but are transferred to a portrait hidden in the attic. That portrait is the embodiment of the empath in this relationship. In the story, the painting bears all the karma for Dorian, allowing him to live in artificial purity. But the difference between fiction and reality lies here. In the story, the painting is locked in the dark. In real life, when the empath awakens, you are that painting, but a walking painting. You no longer accept being hidden in the attic. You step down into the living room, sit opposite them at meals, and walk with them on the street. You display the unvarnished truth of their soul right before their eyes every day. When Dorian Gray was forced to look at his true portrait, looking at the aged, rotting, and resentful face, he could not bear it and self-destructed. The narcissist in your life is the same. They cannot survive psychologically if they are forced to see the truth about themselves continuously reflected through you. The empath's victory, therefore, is not a victory of swords or loud revenge. It is the victory of truth. You do not need to do anything. You do not need to attack, to expose, or to punish. You just need to be a genuine, whole, and unshakable presence. Your existence itself is the fiercest judgment. You become a living witness to what they wish to deny. When you no longer participate in the dance of lies, their entire stage collapses. They realize they cannot manipulate someone who has seen through their soul, and in that moment, power completely returns to your hands. You do not defeat them, you rise above them. The journey from an emotional garbage can to a mirror of truth is a painful but glorious metamorphosis. You have understood the mechanism, grasped the philosophy, and seen the destination of freedom. But I know, between knowing and doing, there always exists a vast gap of daily habits. How do you maintain the calm of the mirror when emotional storms strike in reality? Are there concrete tools to anchor you in silence amidst the violent waves of everyday life? Practical solutions. 3 steps to becoming a sovereign empath. We have journeyed together through the deepest layers of theory and have understood the mechanisms of projection, the shadow, and the mirror of truth. But I understand that between intellectual understanding and practical action, there always exists a vast gap, sometimes as wide as the distance between one shore and the other of an emotional ocean. When the storm strikes, when slurs ring in our ears, our old instincts are often faster than our new reason. Therefore, to anchor you in the stillness of the mirror and prevent you from being swept away, we need concrete tools, sturdy anchors to practice every day. Here is the 3-step roadmap to transform from an enduring empath into a sovereign empath, an empath with sovereignty, the ruler of their own soul's kingdom. Step 1. The detached observer. The first step, and also the most important foundation, is the technique of the detached observer. Imagine you are in a high-end psychological laboratory. When the narcissist begins their familiar cycle of provocation, be it an unreasonable criticism, a punishing silence, or an explosive rage, instead of letting your heart constrict and playing the victim as usual, quickly put on the white coat of a scientist. Visualize that between you and them stands a pane of transparent, thick-tempered glass, blocking all toxic sounds and energy. They are inside the glass cage, and you are outside observing. In this state, completely change your internal dialogue. Instead of asking in pain, "Why did he say that to me? What did I do wrong?" Switch to the tone of a curious researcher. "Oh, how interesting. He is starting the projection cycle. His breathing is faster, and his language is becoming illogical." This is exactly what Carl Jung described about the rising of the shadow. Labeling the event as a psychological phenomenon, rather than a personal attack, will create a safe distance in your consciousness. You are no longer the target of the poison arrow. You are the one observing its flight path. This emotional detachment helps you not to accept the garbage onto yourself. You realize that rage says nothing about your value. It is merely data showing the instability in the other's psychology. You observe the storm, but you do not get wet. Step 2. The silence breaker. Once you have established the position of the observer, you will move to the second stage, a stage demanding iron discipline, the silence breaker. The narcissist lives on your reaction. They need you to explain, need you to cry, need you to get angry, so they feel important and in control. For years, you have unconsciously followed this script with efforts to justify, argue, defend, and explain, also known as the jade trap. But today, you will tear up that script. You will practice the art of active silence. Remember, silence here is not submission or defeat. It is a refusal to participate in the chaotic dance. When they accuse you of unreasonable things, instead of rushing to justify, use short, neutral mantras, devoid of emotional nuance. A classic but extremely effective phrase is, "I am sorry you feel that way." This is not a sarcastic apology, but a neutral boundary setting. You are acknowledging their feelings without accepting the blame. Say it with a flat face, without sarcasm, without anger. This phrase is a perfect psychological strike. You acknowledge their emotion, but you do not take responsibility for it. Or simpler yet, be silent and look at them. Maintain eye contact for a few seconds, then turn away to do something else. Your silence in that moment is the loudest sound the narcissist cannot endure. It creates a terrifying vacuum. They throw a ball at a wall expecting it to bounce back, but the wall has absorbed that force and does not respond. They are left hanging. They lose momentum. Your silence forces them to hear their own absurd voice echoing back in the room. You are teaching them a new lesson, that the door leading to your emotional world has closed, and the old key of manipulation no longer opens it. Step 3. Energy retrieval. However, if you stop merely at defense, you are not yet truly free. True freedom lies in the third step, energy retrieval. This is the deepest transformational step, taking you from a state of coping to a state of living. Be honest with yourself. What percentage of your daily energy do you spend thinking about them? How many hours do you spend analyzing their behavior, worrying about their emotions, or predicting whether they will be happy or sad today? That is precious energy, your libido leaking to the outside. Retrieving energy means you pull the plug from the narcissist's mind and plug it back into your own heart. Stop overthinking for them. Stop worrying on their behalf immediately. Imagine your soul as an inner garden that has been abandoned for too long because the gardener was too busy tending to the neighbor's weed-filled yard. It is time to return. Reclaim every drop of that energy to water your own flowers. Rediscover forgotten hobbies. Reconnect with old friends. Read unread books. Or simply enjoy moments of drinking tea without the constant dread of walking on eggshells. When you begin to be radiant and happy without their permission or presence, you are executing the greatest punishment and lesson for the narcissist. They will realize they are no longer the center of your universe. Your self-sustained happiness is the most eloquent proof that you have successfully detoxed. You do not need to seek revenge with bitterness. The sweetest, noblest revenge is living a life that is full, radiant, and peaceful. Then, their darkness cannot touch your light, because that light does not come from the outside. It radiates from an eternal nuclear reactor within your soul, the place Jung calls the self. This three-step journey is not a straight line, but an upward spiral. There will be days when you stumble. There will be times when you forget your role as an observer and get swept back into the storm. That is perfectly normal. Be gentle with yourself. Stand up and begin again. Every time you choose silence over argument, every time you choose your joy over soothing them, you are laying another brick in the fortress of your sovereignty. And when that wall is complete, you will stand at the peak of awareness, looking down at the one who hurt you with a completely different gaze, not hatred, not fear. So what is that gaze? Could it be, in a grand paradox of the universe, that the narcissist was actually a ruthless teacher sent to help you graduate the lesson of being human? The journey from being a sponge, soaking up another's pain, to becoming a mirror, reflecting the truth, is not just a victory on the psychological chessboard, it is the magnificent resurrection of the soul to find itself. We have walked through the storm, seen through the darkness, and now, standing at the summit of awareness, let us contemplate one final paradox, the paradox of healing. Under the holistic lens of Carl Jung, the narcissist in your life is not merely an enemy to be destroyed, but at a deeper level, they are the harsh teacher that destiny has sent. Try to be honest with your heart. Without their bone-chilling cruelty, would you have ever awakened from the slumber of naive kindness? If not driven to the wall of endurance, would you have ever forced yourself to grow a spine, to forge boundaries, and to discover the extraordinary internal power that, had you lived in artificial comfort, you would never have known you possessed? It is the very hellfire they brought that has forged the whole person you are today. Therefore, transform hatred into noble gratitude, not the gratitude of a victim toward an executioner, but the stillness of one who has climbed the mountain and looks down at the storm that has dissolved beneath their feet. Do not thank the abuser, but be grateful for the expensive lesson they provided. Become the mirror, not with the intent to punish or exact revenge, but to liberate yourself from the chains of the past. When your soul has become as transparent as crystal and as solid as diamond, no darkness can cling to or taint you ever again. That is ultimate freedom. If this journey to find the inner mirror touches your heart, or if you see yourself in these painful yet glorious stages of transformation, please share your story in the comments below. Each share can be a candle lighting the way for others on the healing path. If you feel this video could heal and change someone, even by a small step, please try sharing it with them right now. Finally, do not forget to hit like and subscribe so we can continue together on future deep dives into awakening human potential. Thank you for listening and for bravely facing yourself.